Thank you very much, Mr. Bantwini and Mr. Zola. Yeah, I saw my colleague there smiling when they said professor. I'm not a professor. It's just people call me professor because I make as if I know everything. That's fine. I'm going to run through this very quickly. I will email the paper to the coordinators. First up, people can see by my t-shirt, I'm not a supporter of South African rugby as it is currently constituted. I do not support the Springboks. I do not support any of the provincial teams. The closest one to my heart is probably the Kings, because they're something new and they have been given no chance in this new competition. Besides that, they've only been given 1 year and with a sword hanging over their head, hoping that they would fail. And the revelations have been that they have actually performed, thanks to Mr. Kondakile, that they have performed better than any of the other teams on their entry seasons into the Super Rugby competition. But we will be fooled into this type of thinking because of the way our media is constituted in South Africa. Now, I lecture at the Media Studies Department at Walter Sisulu University, and I particularly deal with visual literacy. Now, the amount of energy invested, the talk of my paper is called Overthrowing the Devil. You can try and think who the devil is here. Now, it's from a larger piece that I'm working on called Sympathy for the Devil. Now, the amount of energy that is invested in maintaining the South African illusion of a rainbow nation is staggering. And all of us here can agree or disagree. Now, the investment has paid off handsomely over the past 20-odd years. And what has happened is a historical and literal genocide of black sporting achievement in this country. Because everything has been buried under white excellence. The media is particularly guilty because they have conspired to give credence to white excellence, dating back hundreds of years. One of our heroes in this country, he's alongside Nelson Mandela in the top 100 South Africans, is Gary Player, who has never apologized for his racist comments in the past. And there are numerous other people, also in that same book. But black people, black sporting history, cannot lay claim to any form of excellence, none whatsoever, because the athletes are by implication inferior. Now, within the media space, there has been nothing coming forth to challenge this, nothing whatsoever, because our media is part of what is known as the nation building project, all of them. The only time I've heard or seen people angry about what is happening on the sporting front has been when Zola was on Morning Live the other day, and then Mr. Bantwini on SAFM. Now and then you get the odd person phoning through, and then they rant and rave and so on. But nobody's challenging the credibility of what we perceive to be our representatives on the rugby fields. Mr. Bantwini spoke about 350 years of exclusion. I say here, we have been plagued by demons for over 350 years. And the 1994 dispensation has not displaced those demons. What has happened is the 1994 dispensation has given those demons credibility. That is what has happened. If you look at Hollywood, for example, and our media model follows the Western example. In the early days of Hollywood film, the devil was most often portrayed by a vampire. And the vampire was the evil one. His job was to destroy you. Over the years, it has changed. Because what has happened is Hollywood has given the devil a personality. So now you can empathize with the devil. The past 5 or 6 years, worldwide, the most popular film series in the world has been the Twilight series, where you have good vampires with personalities, with families, with feelings. And that has been followed through in our media model, where we give credibility and we empathize with the tractor that fell on Gio Cronje, and we forget that Gio Cronje refused to share a room with his teammate, who happened to be a different colored specimen. So that is how our media works. It gives sympathy to those who are out there to destroy us. When we look at film, and film is a good example to see how media works. When you look at the Tarzan movies, very early black and white Tarzan movies, the black people from Africa were inferior to the white king of the jungle. They were the bearers of the baggage, and also they were man-eating savages. And it was always the white people, the white protagonists in the film who were the good guys. In the Western movies, the early American Westerns, the savages were the Native Americans. They were raping and killing women. They were scalping people for no reason. They were just murderers. All of us, when we were growing up, we wanted to be the cowboys. We wanted to be the good guys. It was only later, as political influence got into Hollywood, that we started to see movies like Little Big Man, Dances with Wolves, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, Trail of Tears, and so on, where we started to see that what had happened in America, these savages were trying to defend their land. And they encountered weapons of an industrial nature which wiped them out in their hundreds, even thousands. That even today, America refuses to acknowledge that what happened to the indigenous people was genocide. In South Africa, why there was no genocide is because black labor was needed to extract the mineral wealth from the ground. And that is why they did not exterminate the black people. What they did was they exterminated their history. So we have given, post-1994, our demons personalities. We've given them pride of place in our hearts. And there's no example more pertinent than the Springbok. The perpetrators and beneficiaries of apartheid have been given keys to the global village, while the victims of the great crime of apartheid have been left to empty the buckets of night soil. And what we have today is we have public relations for monsters. The type of advertising on our televisions can be, oh, there I lost my place now, can be quite amusing if we were in a normal society. We see social and racial harmony on our TVs, in our soapies, our adverts, and so on. The guys are going together to a rugby match and it all comes together with the castle and so on. But there are other types of adverts also that erode the historical truth of what happens in South Africa. For example, the popular song by PJ Powers and Hotline from the 1980s, where she sang about a place, Jabulani, where people come together. And you must remember, in Jabulani, what she was singing about was black and white people coming together illegally to get to know one another. And she was singing about this place where people sing and dance. Now that same song is being used in an advert today to advertise Kellogg's cornflakes. And you see Jabulani and the people hit their dishes, Jabul. And what the advert says is, for generations, South Africans have been waking up to the traditional breakfast of Kellogg's cornflakes, which is not the truth. The traditional breakfast in South Africa is maize meal. But it is being, in that way, it's also being removed from our soul, from what we are. So these things happen in an insidious way, in a seemingly innocent way, but it is totally damaging to who we are as Africans and South Africans. So our sports stars are particularly easy to use to move people into that type of thinking, because we want to be excellent. We want to be part of a winning team. And as I always ask, can we be a winning nation if our communities are not winning? I don't think we can, because our fleet-footed representatives on the field of play, the minute they feel they are not being recognized, those who can, go and develop rugby in Japan and France and Italy and England. And we are left here to pick up the pieces. And what we are doing is we're trying to pick up the pieces or the scraps from the table. I don't want to be part of that. And I say it openly to everybody. I don't want to be part of that. When we look at the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there's one part that stands out for me, and that was when Dirk Coetzee confessed that he had killed at least 6 people at Vlakplaas. He confessed, but he confessed in a way that said that he didn't personally pull the trigger. You know, he couldn't remember who it was. It was a tall guy, he looked like this, but I don't know, I think he was a warrant, but he couldn't remember. He remembered in detail the type of weapon, everything he remembered, but the name and what, he couldn't remember. The same Dirk Coetzee was welcomed onto Dali Tambo's People of the South as the honorable assassin. And I'll just read you some of what is said here. Dali Tambo welcomes Dirk Coetzee. So Dirk, welcome, welcome. Dirk Coetzee says, thank you very much. Thank you for the honor of being on your show. I really appreciate it. Tambo goes on. Dirk, our honor entirely. Pause, people are clapping. What would you say to a young man thinking of a career in the police force? You know, he's saying to himself, I want to be a copper. Dirk Coetzee says, responds to Tambo, well, I'd say it's an adventure. It's an adventure that turns one on. Now, this is from a report that was released in 1998 by the journalist John Polger called Apartheid Did Not Die. Now, the book goes on to say that Coetzee was eventually, as we all know, given amnesty for his implication in the murder of 6 people. And at the time of writing, he was a consultant, one of the highest paid security consultants in South Africa for one of the largest private security firms in Africa. I imagine that I heard he passed away recently, but I didn't check it out. But he wasn't alone in being lauded as a hero. His boss, F.W. de Klerk, shared the podium with Nelson Mandela in collecting the Nobel Peace Prize. So, you know, all these awards, the glamour, the accolades and so on, overshadow the realities of a country that is tearing itself apart from the community level to pieces. We are killing each other. We have the highest non-natural death rate in the world. Now, what has happened is we have, on the one hand, we have horror, and on the other hand, we have distraction. We have horror at the community level, where there's nothing for our communities. Yet, and this is where I want to caution guys, Mr. Bantwini knows this, that we must not buy eggs from the guys who stole our chickens. We must not be part of that. Because in the old days of the Roman Empire, you had the slaughter inside the Colosseum with people cheering. And the gladiators were there, and the Christians were thrown to the lions and all that type of thing. In South Africa today, we have the same Colosseums, but the slaughter is happening outside. And it is such a mundane and everyday occurrence that people no longer take notice of it. We are cheering what is happening inside. In 1994, the world was focused on the O.J. Simpson trial. And the world was focused on what was happening in South Africa, the first democratic elections in South Africa. That the world only woke up when it was almost 1995 to the fact that close to, 1 million people were slaughtered in Rwanda. Nobody took notice of that. Biggest news was O.J. Simpson. Same thing like we've got one of the highest murder rates in the world. The only time we take notice of it is when Jacques Callas complains about a cricketer that was murdered. I've forgotten his name now. And when Oscar Pistorius shoots his girlfriend. then all of a sudden South Africans want to recoil with horror. Now, we entered into a new era of liberal democracy and a better life for all. We have the best constitution in the world. T's and C's apply. That sport is being used in a way of dissuading people and persuading people that you are part of that. Yet I think it is only here in PE where the ticket prices are priced in such a way that people could go to the rugby. We went to a Super 14 match in Durban some years back, the Sharks versus the Bulls, the final. And the tickets prices were what, 450 Rand? You know, for a sort of an interprovincial, well, international interprovincial match. How many people can afford that? If I want to go with myself and my son, it's 900 bucks. So we've got to look at how this new dispensation has used sport to distract us from the fact that the beast who we support is actually killing us. Not slowly, but quickly. We're dying at a rate that our life expectancy rate is now, it's 59. Couple of years, in 2007, when South Africa last won the World Cup, our life expectancy rate was 47. But we want to celebrate the fact that the Springboks won the World Cup. I don't care if they win the World Cup for the next 200 years. We are not enjoying a normal society. None of us even. Whether we become part of the egg-selling crew or not. Now, I'm almost finished here. I want to ask, how is it possible that we as South Africans can forget what is happening to us and what we have gone through to liberate a handful of people to enjoy rugby at an international level? I'm not interested in international rugby, not at all. The other day on the news there was a story of a youngster, a matriculant, shot and killed at Spesbone in the Western Cape. Now Spesbone used to be one of the top rugby schools in the country. Those schools don't exist. Our current rugby Springboks are chosen from, how many high schools have we got in this country? Probably over 20,000 high schools. Our rugby Springboks are chosen probably from 30 out of that 20. And that situation has not changed since 1906 to now. And it will never change. And we mustn't even try to change it. We must just remove ourselves from it. In 1998, Nelson Mandela defended the compromises at Codesa when speaking to John Pilger. He said to John Pilger, and this is Mandela's quote, "You must remember that the best way to introduce transformation is to do so without dislocating any aspect of our public life. We do not want to challenge big business that can take fright and take away their money." It's a telling quote, because even our great Madiba is acknowledging who the economy belongs to. Right? When we came here now, what is the name of that school there on top? We saw a school now that is having a rugby, netball, and sports day. And they're sponsored by some company, and all the cars are there, and there's balloons and banners and everything. Now that is why I say, we're expecting of a sport, one sport, to transform. Whereas that sport is the pillar of a society that has not transformed. We're being unreasonable. You know? This turnaround by Mandela went unnoticed by us, all of us. And the effects of the retention of the apartheid economic and social privilege has had devastating effects on our communities. We have gone backwards. Our communities have gone backwards. The people who have managed to, the people who were liberated, we can see them on TV. We can see where they live. We can see what they drive. Those are the people who were liberated by the 1994 dispensation. Big Brother looks at a big brother that watches everything you do and controls everything you do. and we will probably agree with a lot of what is written in that book. But there was another book written in 1937 by somebody by the name of Aldous Huxley. I'm getting to the last bit here now. Aldous Huxley's book was called A Brave New World. And Aldous Huxley challenged George Orwell's book, even though it was written earlier. Aldous Huxley said, there will be a world where you don't need to hide things from people. You don't need to watch them. All you need to do is to give them distraction. And you give them so much information that they won't know what to look for. And they will enslave themselves through what he calls Bumble Puppy. Bumble Puppy is a fictional game that is played in his book. And that is what we are busy with. We have got 50 million people in this country. 50 million. Probably of that 50 million, 38 million are black. Yet we support a team where it is seen it's natural, and we applaud it when we've got 4 black players in that team. Chris Laidlaw, former All Black captain, wrote a book called Somebody Stole My Game. In that book, Chris Laidlaw warns the rugby world of the sleeping giant that is black South Africa. He warns them in that book. But we are so far behind the top team in the world, which has a population less than half of Johannesburg. 4 million people in New Zealand total. But it's because the entire nation is part of their sporting culture. Let me just go here to this last thing. Now, we are pandering to the colonial mindset, and we want to be part of it. And I just don't understand that. When we say we want to change things, what do we mean by that? Where do we want to go? What do we want? We must be clear on those things. Because our revolution never happened. Our revolution was deflected into Codesa. And out of Codesa came the situation we are in. The mess we're sitting in today, the crime, the corruption, everything, was negotiated. And you can look at the parties that negotiated at Codesa, and you can decide who came out of Codesa better for the negotiations. It is plain there, we can see it. It's not as if we're going to have to. We have a system where we suddenly had new types of capitalists being introduced into this country. Tokyo Sequale, a former trade unionist, was there. He became a TV star on TV, on a copycat TV show called The Apprentice. And the words he used was, "You're fired." That was the catchphrase of the TV show. In South Africa, that was considered normal. We've got to remember that it is the nature of the devil to destroy us. The beast thrives on human misery and grows strong on the backs of those it destroys. And that's why I'm talking about the credibility, Mr. Matika. Yet we are quick to sympathize and make excuses for the beast, because we are fed images and narratives of his fallibility. And I will close here. My interest is in the accuracy of our historical record, because that is what our future is built on, our history. And as Nelson Mandela indicated earlier, in that earlier quote I gave you, who the economy belongs to, he also acknowledged who the Springbok belongs to. In the book called Now Listen Here, the history of the life and times of Bill Jardine, Mark Alexander will know Bill Jardine quite well. Mandela says this when people brought up the issue of the Springbok. Mandela said this to the guys: "Gentlemen, I want the Springbok to remain our national emblem. I do know how you feel about it, but we have taken so much away from the white man. Let us, at least as a gesture of reconciliation, allow him to keep his Springbok." Thank you.